Throughout history, we see instances of people performing extraordinary tasks and not getting the recognition they honestly deserve. People who have a moment of great courage, a stroke of pure genius, or took a chance against the odds and cultural norms and changed history in the process to nearly be forgotten. Join us today as we discuss one of these unsung heroes of history with the men that led the charge at Gettysburg.
You're listening to History Unscripted with Gabriel and Carl.
Welcome back, everybody. History Unscripted with Gabriel and Carl. We are here for another very exciting episode. We are starting a series that him and I, we've been looking forward to for a while. We feel like we're at the best spot to do it now. We didn't want to start the podcast necessarily doing this. We wanted to get some episodes in before we jumped into this series, but our series is Unsung Heroes of History. There are thousands and thousands of people that have made history, and nobody knows who they are. And when I say nobody, I mean nobody outside that niche of history that people, there are, of course, certain people that follow certain points in history that know just about every character. But there are so many that the average American just does not know. And so I think one of the reasons why we study history is to tell the stories. We owe it to those that came before us to tell their stories. And today we are starting here at home in a battle not super far from where I live, very far away from where Carl lives, the Battle of Gettysburg. Joshua Chamberlain. Now, to all my Civil War buffs, I understand that in the Civil War circle, this is a name that is very common. But let's be honest, if you pull a random American, and we'll even say he has some college, he or she has gone to school, they're educated, they're not some rube, you go Joshua Chamberlain, Battle of Gettysburg, and they go, huh? Who are you talking about? You mean Robert E. Lee? Oh, Ulysses S. Grant? I've heard that name. Abraham Lincoln. You're talking about Abraham Lincoln, aren't you? Right? Those are the names that Americans know. But you say Joshua Chamberlain in 2026, and most Americans are going to look at you like they have no clue who that person is. And again, within Civil War circles, there's a lot of debate about his achievements and did he embellish. And I think we just need to start off by saying that that's not really, we're not going to dive too much into that necessarily, that debate, because there was a point where he was a very popular person in American history. But I think today he can be considered an unsung hero of history. So, but before we dive into who Joshua Chamberlain was, what did he do, why he was important, we have to set up the Civil War. We have to set up the Battle of Gettysburg. We have to give you guys that context so you understand the significance of him and his troops' action, because he was a leader of men. So it's only fair to talk about him and his men too that he led in the Battle of Gettysburg. So, Carl, let's start off. I will ask you why. No, I'll just ask you this. Tell me what you know about the Civil War, just in general.
In general, that's kind of a big question. Um, Obviously, the separation of the North and South, um, and I always saw it as not necessarily about the slave issue, period. Even though that's what the head that it came to. It
Mm-hmm.
was more about the state's freedom to do whatever they wanted, irregardless of what the Union of the United States has declared. And that was really what it was about. Um, this, and like I said, that slavery was the main point, the main head that it all came down on at that time. But honestly, it would have happened at some point in history,
Mm-hmm.
in our nation's history. Um, and very grueling, very bloody. Um, you had some of the best tacticians up until this point duking it out, home field advantage for both squads. Um, and on one side, on the Union, it was a lot of industrial and very economic. And then on the South side, their main fighting was a lot of grit and determination.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was contrast of styles, but it's still brother versus brother. Very fascinating time.
Oh yeah, I agree, fascinating. This is my favorite time in history. Again, I could talk about this forever and ever and ever, and we're going to try to keep our scope limited. But again, I think you covered it really well. Slavery, I love this is how it goes. The Civil War is fought over states' rights. Okay, fine. But what did they want the right to do? And it wasn't just to own slaves. It was to expand slavery. Because Abraham Lincoln was elected, he said, I will not touch your slaves, but I'm also not going to let it expand. In the southern states, that was enough to upset them. So again, you're right. It's this idea that we can do whatever the heck we want, regardless of what the federal government says. And that's a battle that had been going back to the Articles of Confederation, right? I mean, when the Articles of Confederation, which was our first government, that gave so much power to the states that we essentially weren't a union. So, okay, so then they make the Constitution, but that sentiment that I am a Texan and what's good for Texas is what's good for me, I still think that sentiment is all littered throughout the South, right? I am state first, country second. And it makes sense, right? These dudes don't go, like I live in North Carolina and I travel all over the East Coast, right? I go up to West Virginia, I go to South Carolina. Like I love America because it is a beautiful state and I love camping and fishing all over the country because I can do that because I have a car. But back then when you lived on your farm, all you knew was your little town in your state, and that's where your pride came from. So again, again, the states that right to expand slavery, that slavery, it was in their constitutional right as if they want to expand slavery to every new state that joined, they should be able to do that. If the people want to vote in slavery, do it. So Abraham Lincoln, that's what ticks off the South. Is not, I'm going to take away your slavery. It is, I'm not going to let you expand slavery. So Civil War happens. I'm going to try to be quick. Most people thought it would be a very quick war. The Union, they were going to invade. They were going to take Richmond. Bada bing, bada boom. We're going to have a nice little grand party, and everything's going to be fine again. Well, that couldn't have been further from the truth. The first Battle of Bull Run hits, in the Southern, like the Confederates win. And they rout the Union. The Union troops are running back to where they came from, across the lines. And then Americans in the North realize, holy moly, this is going to be a long, grueling war. Because, like you said, the Southerners, the Confederates had that grit, that determination, that I'm going to defend my home turf. And they were incredible soldiers. Like you said, some of the most brilliant minds in military history come out of this war. Some of the most incredible soldiers up to that point in history is happening. So out east, General E. Lee is almost, I think he pretty much is undefeated. And nobody thinks he can win. Every time the North, the Union, tries to do anything, he can outmaneuver. It's like he's 2 steps ahead of McClellan, it was really the Army of Potomac was the army that Abraham Lincoln had formed, and it was really McClellan for a majority of the time before Gettysburg. And let me talk a little bit about McClellan. So McClellan, he was actually very, very tactfully, like he was very intelligent, and he was great at like organizing, but he was so slow. I read an autobiography about Abraham Lincoln, and he would write, and he would just beg McClellan, you've got 100,000 troops, like go win the damn war.
Just do something.
Yes, he's begging him, and McClellan just won't. And so Robert E. Lee seems like he's invincible on the east. Right now, to be fair, on the west with Ulysses S. Grant, you have some victories by the Union, right? You have like Pea Ridge, Arkansas was a pretty significant victory. You have Vicksburg, you have Shiloh, you have, I think those are the main 3. And again, excuse me if I'm missing 1 or 2. But again, in the West, the Union is having success. But in the East, Robert E. Lee owns the battlefield, especially in Virginia, because that's where he was from. That was his home turf. Okay, so to set up Gettysburg, you have to understand the Union on the east, the Army of the Potomac is not in a great situation. Robert E. Lee has once before Gettysburg in Pennsylvania, he's gone up into the Union and had to be beaten back. So that's how much, like, you could almost say freedom of maneuvering he has. He's to the point where he can start thinking about, hey, I'm going to hit closer to Washington, D.C., and I'm going to start putting some pressure on the Union, and I'm going to start putting some pressure on these politicians in Washington to end this war quickly. Because the whole reason Robert E. Lee is even going to Gettysburg or going up north is because he knows he's got to get a quick victory. Because out west, the Union controls the Mississippi. So it's only a matter of time before the Confederacy will bleed, and it will bleed a slow death without the Mississippi River. So we're talking about 1863, summer of 1863. Robert E. Lee just gets a decisive victory at Chancellorsville, and he's like, you know what? I'm going up north. I'm going to cross into the Union territory, and I'm going to put pressure on. What'd you say? You told me the term of these politicians, the peace, like kind of the peace movement, I guess you could say. What were they called again?
They're called the Copperhead Movement, which
Okay, you want
aptly
to maybe
named.
talk about that a little?
Yeah, basically, it was a movement started by politicians and laymen in the North, where they were really pursuing to just put an end to the war. They just didn't want to fight. They just didn't want to spend the resources. They were basically the laissez-faire, yeah, whatever, let them live how they want to live. And so they were even like pulling support. Businesses were not sending resources to that war effort. Politicians were then lobbying against it and polling votes and stuff like that. And so they're called the Copperheads because they're named after a venomous snake from the South.
Oh, okay. That's really cool. That's really cool. So there's growing tension. And again, that's the thing with the United States, right? We may have the most powerful military in the world, and we may have a political system that, for the most part, I guess you would say, maybe not for the most part, unfortunately, today, you know, you have the will of the people, right? You have voting, you have democracy, republic. The problem with that is that's not very efficient in war. I mean, you don't want to have a bunch of politicians making decisions like in war, right? Because they can't agree on anything. Like Congress gets nothing done. So one of the downsides that Abraham Lincoln is facing is he's getting close to re-election, right? It's 1863. He was elected in 1860. And he's got to have some significant victories in the East because 3 years the war and he hadn't really had that victory. Now, they had victories out west, yes, but if you are in Boston or if you're along the East Coast, you don't give a damn what is going on out of the Mississippi. You're
That's
just
civil
hearing about,
territories.
yes. So, like, yeah, it's easy for historians to look at it and be like, well, like, yeah, they would have won eventually. Like, the South really, after the Battle of Vicksburg, the South really had no chance. I mean, we can talk about that. But if you're a guy living in Boston or Philadelphia or New York, and you're a politician down there, and all you're hearing about is the Army, your boys are getting their butts whooped by Lee. You're like, yeah, why are we doing this? Like, who cares? Let them live their
Well,
life.
especially Philadelphia, because Philadelphia is on the way to Washington, D.C. from
Yeah,
Gettysburg.
yeah, that's
They
a
were
really good
in the
point.
path.
Yeah, yeah. I bet they were just shaking in their boots, dude, when they heard that the Robert E. Lee. Because, again, news traveled fairly quickly back then. I mean, not as quick as now, obviously, but, like, it wasn't like it was, the Middle Ages. I mean, I guarantee word spread fast that Lee is marching his army up north. And I bet it was a very, very scary time for Union people. I'll just say soldiers, civilians, everybody in the Union when he crosses into Pennsylvania.
Well, and I also think it's worth mentioning that at this time, because of the losses in the East, there is tons of unrest within the Army of the Potomac because there's a lot of deserters. There's news of a change in leadership. There's rumors of the war ending. Morale is really low. And so all these things play into your mind, and now the enemy is in your territory.
Right.
Um, and so another victory that close to Washington, that would put you on the back foot really badly.
Yes. Yes, dude. That I truly believe that the South was never going to win the war in a typical fashion, but I absolutely think had the Union lost Gettysburg, I truly believe the South, like we could still have the like states of America today.
They were trying to win the Civil War the same way the colonies won the
Yes.
Revolutionary War.
Yes. They were just praying to God that Abraham Lincoln would lose the election, the pressure would be on, and the next president would be like, we'll just sign a peace treaty. I mean, you think of like the Iran war today, right? That's all Iran has, right? They're just waiting for midterms. They know that President Trump only has 4 years. I mean, at this point, he's got essentially 2 years left. You know, it's not a super uncommon thing in history for an opposing army to just wait out the other side, especially when you're fighting a country that, although is very powerful, has elections. So that brings us that kind of sets up kind of the stakes, I think. You know, I'm not pulling out a map. You know, I encourage our listeners, go look at a map. Maybe as you're listening to this, watching. There's so many awesome YouTube videos where they show the routes of the troops. But essentially, from Virginia, they're marching up. Both armies are down in Virginia. It's not like you have General Meade, the Army Potomac coming south, and they're just meeting in the middle. They're both down in Virginia, and they both are racing up. And they meet at Gettysburg because Gettysburg has a bunch of roads that lead into it. So it's a major, and again, road equals not only transportation, but back then road equals communication. It's not only like, well, they wanted the roads because they could transport supplies. No, they wanted roads too, so they could communicate. They could get on the horses and they could communicate with one another. And so that is why Gettysburg's a very, very appealing spot. And that is where the battle takes place. And fun fact, it's a tiny little town. Like it's a very rural area. It's not some major city, but again, it has those roads. And so that is why Gettysburg is chosen. So first day of fighting, again, I'm not going to dive. Maybe we will have a Gettysburg podcast. And again, if you guys want to listen, if you want us to really dive into the battle, absolutely. We will just put in the comments and we will dive into the Battle of Gettysburg. But our main focus is Chamberlain and the 20th Maine. So Battle of Gettysburg, first day, actually see some success from the Confederates. So day 2 arrives. It's July 2nd, 1863. I'm sure it's just hot as all can be. And the Union Army is in a fishhook, okay? And they control, for the most part, they control the high ground over Gettysburg. Cemetery Ridge. I do have this map up. I'll just name some of these kind of famous locations. You can Google this. There you have, they're south of the city, and the Union Army is just in a fishhook along Cemetery Ridge. You have a little round top, big round top, Cemetery Hill, Culp's Hill, and then the Confederate lines are along like the Peach Orchard, along this road called Emmitsburg Road, Seminary Ridge. And so where Josh Chamberlain finds himself is he finds himself on Little Round Top on almost like the furthest left flank of this Union fishhook. And why does it matter that he's along the flank? Well, the Confederates have enough troops that if they can get around that flank, they can essentially roll the Union Army up. And if you go back in military history, if you can surround your enemy, you don't even have to have more troops in them. Because I believe the Union Army still had around 100,000 and Robert E. Lee's Northern Army of Virginia had about 80,000. So the Union has the army size, but if Lee can get his forces and surround the Union forces, or kind of roll them up, then that's going to be really bad news for the Union. It has some serious potential to end the battle in the Confederates' favor. But that is where Josh Chamberlain finds himself. Hot day, 1863, July 2nd, 2 days before America's birthday. he finds himself in this situation where he will change history. Him and his unit will change history. So, Carl, who is this guy sitting on Little Round Top, leading these dudes from Maine, middle of nowhere America? Who is this guy? How does he find himself here in 1863, July 2nd?
Yeah, so I'll go kind of tell the story of his early life leading up to that. He was born in 1828 in Brewer, Maine, Joshua and Sarah Chamberlain. Turns out his dad was actually a huge military fanboy, I guess you could say. Loved everything military. But young Joshua just didn't actually care for it at all. He actually graduated with a degree in, let me see if I can, in languages and rhetoric,
Dude,
whatever that is.
That is the most Civil War degree. Like, that is the most 1800s degree you can have.
Oh, I'll do you one better. His wife's name was Fanny.
Dude, so many jokes. You just know it. You just know it.
Just, yep, and the picture of him, gigantic bushy mustache.
Oh, yeah.
He probably had more hair on his upper lip than he did on the top of his head. It was
we
crazy.
could do a podcast about his mustache itself. That's how it's like it's a living organism on his face.
It was something to behold. It covered his entire, it's covered his chin.
Yeah. Okay.
But then at the start of the war, he joined purely as a way to serve his country and no other reason.
Okay.
And we mentioned it before we started, but because he went to college, he was a professor, he was a learned, intelligent man, even with zero previous military experience, he was promoted to lieutenant colonel upon signature.
Oh man, I wish it was that easy today.
Crazy.
You can read? Yep, you're in.
You can read? Hey, third in command, bud.
Third in command.
That's just crazy. Talk about the fast track. All you got to do is read.
Yeah.
Goodness. Yeah. But what he had on his side was he was extremely willing to learn and to teach. And so it says here that on the way down from Maine to Virginia, he read and studied every piece of his military tactics, history he could possibly get his hands on. And he showed up late to the Battle of Antietam. And so his unit didn't participate, but he was on the hill overlooking the battle with his colonel. And his colonel, who was a graduate of West Point, was pointing things out to him and saying, now, you see them moving this way, here's how you counter that. Or see our men moving this way, here's what they have to watch out for. And so kind of giving a crash course. Then the colonel, which I don't think I wrote down his name, unfortunately, but he was promoted. And so then Lieutenant Colonel Chamberlain got promoted to full colonel I think it was like 2 weeks before Gettysburg. And so Gettysburg is actually his first big battle in a command setting.
Okay. That's actually really important. Like our listeners need to understand that's really freaking important. That this is his like first battle as like a full like colonel. I mean, that's this dude. I mean,
people get nervous on their first day of a new job.
Yeah, seriously.
And this guy is leading 1,000 men with their lives in his hands.
Yeah. In some of the most gruesome fighting the world has ever seen. So, okay, I'll let you continue.
That up until the battle, that's about what I got.
Okay.
At least that's what I've felt was important to set up the story.
Okay. No, I agree. So I will add a few things. So in the Battle of Gettysburg, the 20th Maine, that's his unit. They're quite. They've lost a lot of men. I think he's down to like around 200. So he's in a depleted fighting force. These you got to remember these dudes marched everywhere. So did you find where he was before Gettysburg?
Just that he was with the Army of the Potomac.
Okay, but they're marching their tails off. And that's when I try not to just. I could just be on my soapbox for days about this, but I mean, the level of responsibility, the level of endurance he has to have. And yeah, maybe he's riding a horse with his men, but he's still like that still actually kind of can wear you out. Like it's just the fact that like this is how tough these men were, I guess. That this guy, we can joke about how he gets his promotions and his commission as an officer, but he was learning on the job at one of the most high pressure environments you could possibly have, not getting enough sleep, not eating well enough. And again, I think to understand, like, again, what his accomplishment was in the Gettysburg and what his men did, again, you just have to, our listeners have to understand just, again, the conditions. I'm sure they're just exhausted, and now they got to hold this hill against the Confederates. So kind of go back. So the 20th Maine is depleted, but he does get some reinforcements. I believe it was the 5th Maine group. They were like almost on the edge of mutiny. I'm pretty sure he had orders to like shoot them if they didn't agree. But because he's a Maine guy, and because these guys are so loyal, to their community, to their state, he's like, I'm not going to shoot these guys. These guys are from Maine. That's where I'm from. I'm not going to kill them. And he actually convinces many of them to join and bolster his ranks. So again, to me, that's just an element of what kind of makes him this, I guess you could say, unsung hero is, it's not what he's doing just in the battle. It's what he's doing everything first, right? He's learning on the job. He's like bolstering his force because he's not going to shoot these guys. He's not going to punish these guys. He's going to convince these other Maine soldiers to join his forces. And next thing you know, he's got, well over 200 troops to defend, which is probably still not enough, but it's better than what he had before. So do you want to speak on a little bit, like kind of the battle itself, like what he did? So what makes this guy, so second day of fighting, Gettysburg kicks off. The Confederates need to take Little Round Top so they can fold up the Union Army. Well, Carl, what does Colonel Chamberlain do, him and his mustache? What makes this guy so impressed? Like, what makes him this unsung hero?
Sorry, just something funny that I just thought of.
No,
We were talking about his mustache. Maybe he got promoted just on his mustache.
Yeah, they're like
that's impressive.
Yeah, if you can grow a
And you
mustache
can
like
speak
that.
with that. You can
Yeah.
speak with that thing on your face. Yeah, you're good at leading men.
Yeah. Yeah, listeners, I promise you when you Google this dude and you see his mustache, you'll get it. I promise you.
Oh man, yeah,
Yeah.
you could probably do a handstand on that thing. It's crazy.
Okay.
Anyway, so like you said, second day of fighting, and the Army of the Potomac is in an absolute wreck. There's no organization. There's not much communication. Officers are disobeying orders left and right.
Mhm.
If we get to him, I found a story about a different gentleman in the Battle of Gettysburg that was put in an extremely perilous position as well because a general to his left just abandoned his post with his men.
Oh, really?
And so it's mayhem.
Hmm.
And so part of that is there's no delivery. And so the 20th Maine actually runs out of ammunition while on top of the hill. And so here's Chamberlain. He has to hold this hill because, like you said, it's the bend of the fishhook. if the Confederates get on top of it, well, they're just going to put up their mortars and their cannons, and they're going to
Right.
shell the rest
Yes.
of the Union outcroppings, and it's going to be game over.
Well,
And
I will
so,
correct you just on one thing. It's not the hook. He's on the left side. But what you're saying is if they get the high ground, yeah, that's what they're going to do.
yeah, they're
But I
just going
do.
to
Yeah.
shell them, and yeah, it'll be game over. And so, what he does is he orders his men to fix bayonet and charge down the hill. And as the Confederates are actively advancing on the hill, and they're vastly outnumbered
Mm.
in this area. And so, him ordering the bayonets and the charge actually surprises the Confederates so much that they retreat.
Hmm.
And then they're able to hold Little Round Top for long enough for then the rest of the army to achieve a victory.
Right. Yeah, yeah, they again, when you say it in words, it's like, okay, so what? He ordered a bayonet charge. But you got to understand, like Carl said, the communication in the Civil War is very difficult. The smoke of the battlefield, you can't see, you can't hear, you're not getting supplies in. And next thing you know, yeah, he's noticing his guys are running out of ammunition. And so you're going to hold this hill. I mean, so many of weaker men, I think, would just abandon. Like you said, like, he's immortal. Like, these are mortal men fighting. Like, fear in the fear of death is a real thing. And he puts that away, and his men put that away, and they fix bayonets. And this is a last gasp. If this does not work, the lefts, like the Confederates, they will get around and they will fold up the Union Army. And like Carl said, they will get the high ground, and they can put their artillery there, they can put their mortars, whatever. And it's going to be very, very difficult for the Union Army to win. If the Union Army loses Gettysburg, and it doesn't even have to be a full, like we've talked about, a full defeat, just any sort of victory on Union soil puts the entire war effort in peril.
Hmm.
And so here Josh Chamberlain sits, this professor of rhetoric. History is focusing in on him. What is he going to do? And he fixes bayonets and he charges. And the Confederates turn around and they run. And the 20th Maine, along with the 5th Maine, the guys that joined in, they actually capture a lot of Confederate troops. And they keep that left side steady. Now, again, we're going to talk about another guy who's put in a perilous situation because there's plenty of people in Gettysburg that are in a perilous situation between 3 days of insane fighting. And there's all heroes. But again,
Hmm.
our focus right now is on that left flank, and that left flank holds, which allows General Meade, because General Meade's in a decent spot where he can reinforce where needed. And so as long as that left side holds, General Meade can focus on the center and he can reinforce troops where the gaps, and that's what he does. And that's actually a big reason why the Union wins, is because General Meade actually had a pretty strong position. But if it's because of the 20th Maine that happens. Now, there is some debate that I don't think we should really get into a whole lot, but there is some debate. I was reading some things and listening to some things about how General Oates or whatever from the Confederate side said, "Well, I already told them to retreat anyways." To be honest with you, I don't think that's true. I think he's just making that up. I would if I got my butt kicked like that, I'd be like, "Oh no, I told them to retreat. We were done anyways." Like,
Hmm.
no, you just like, yes, were the Confederate troops tired? But that goes into why the bayonet charge was so successful. Because I think the Confederates, that was the last thing they thought was going to happen, was a
Hmm.
freaking bayonet charge.
Well, it was so unconventional.
Yeah,
Like, you have the high ground. You're not going to give up the high ground, especially to charge down a hill at a force that's much larger than you are,
right.
that's ready to shoot their guns. And, like, you're just not going to do that.
Right, right. I'm so glad you brought that up because it is unconventional, even for the training of the time. It's not that they didn't do bayonet charges in the Civil War. Of course they did. But you're telling me you're going to leave the high ground. And if this doesn't succeed, your entire regiment may legitimately be wiped out. And then Gettysburg could be lost. And he does. And he takes that risk, you know? And I think that's why he is a hero.
I
And again,
did read that some of the people of his own unit, after a while, after about a decade, because Chamberlain actually did receive the Medal of Honor
mhm.
for his bayonet charge. Um, and he went around the country speaking and wrote books and all this sort of stuff and was the cover of magazines and he got a lot of press. Um, I did read that some of his men had grown tired of the limelight that Chamberlain was receiving, and they were calling into question if he was embellishing his own story. Now, once again, like you said, is that just some jealousy speaking, or did Chamberlain really embellish a little bit? Probably some bit of both.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. But I don't think you can't just discredit what he did.
No.
Because it was his decision, dude. The buck stopped with him. I mean, it was his decision. But the 20th Maine, those are the dudes that did it. I mean, can you imagine again marching for miles and miles and you haven't ate and you haven't slept and you've been fighting in the smoke and like you said, the communication, you're not getting supplies. I mean, when I was in the army, like like if I didn't have an MRE at least once a day, twice a day, like I was in rough shape, and that maybe like for a week, if I only had 2 MREs a day, I was like, man, I'm starting to notice my energy like going down. Like, oh man, I'm walking a lot. Can you imagine eating hardtack, which was just
Yeah.
bread and like just this hard bread along with maybe a little bacon and you got some coffee. I mean, they're better. They are much better eating than the Confederates for sure, without question. But it ain't great. And a lot of these dudes are malnourished, or at least borderline malnourished. And next thing you know, you hear fix bayonets. And you're like,
Are you
oh,
crazy?
yeah. And they did it, dude. They did it. They put all of their own thoughts away and they did it. And they did it for, but what's the question? What did they do it for? Well, I guess in some ways we'll never know. It's so easy to be like, well, they did it for the good of the country and they just love their country. But I don't know. I think they probably did it for the man standing next to them.
Hmm.
You know, you read that a lot. Like I never went to war, thank God. But you read a lot about that. It's like at the end of the day, you do it for the dude next to you. And so, dude, I think all these guys are heroes. But Chamberlain, absolutely, he made that decision, and that decision changed Gettysburg.
Yeah. No, it is not at all a stretch to say that an unconventional decision by an untrained person, a professor of rhetoric, I can't get over that,
I know.
saved America as we know it.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a good way of describing it. And again, I know in Civil War niches, like I get it. There's some people that'll probably they could argue with us all day about that. But that is what makes history so much fun, right? Because we will never know the full 100% truth. There's a truth out there. We'll just never know it all. And these discussions are a lot of fun. But I like the way you said that. It was an unconventional move by a dude who really shouldn't have been there in the first place, but he was there and he took on that responsibility.
That's the mark of a hero.
I agree. It's not a Tolkien quote, but it's from Lord of the Rings where Gandalf says it's not like the big actions. I'll just Google it because it's such a good quote. I think this is almost a quote you could like literally live by. Let me see. It's by Gandalf. Quote about heroes. Again, I don't think it's in the Lord of the Rings. Let me see if I can find it. I'm not gonna spend. Here we go. Here, Gandalf wisdom. Here we go. So, 1 second. Never mind. 1 second. Oh, here we go. Saruman believes it is only great power that can hold evil in check, but that is not what I have found. I have found it as the small, everyday deeds of ordinary folk that keep the darkness at bay, simple acts of kindness and love. Now, again, is Chamberlain acting in kindness and love? No. He's definitely not acting in love when he's telling his men to fix bayonets and poke these Confederate soldiers. But the point is that, it's just the action they had to do, and they did it. And that is what makes him and his men a hero. It's not this huge thing. He had 200 men and he just did a bayonet charge. You know, he didn't say bring up the cannons, and he did the biggest cannon bombardment in the entire war and saved the day. He didn't ride in with the cavalry, with the sabers, you know, that we all love to see in the movies. It was a grueling, dirty, on this hill in the summer, malnourished men fixing bayonets and charging. And that is what kept the evil at bay, which was the Confederate troops. Not that they're all evil necessarily, but this point of the metaphor.
Yeah.
So that leads me, now we got some time, we can talk about some other guys involved in Gettysburg that, again, don't get the press they deserve. And I want to start here. It's a sergeant by the name of, and I hope I pronounce this right, and he was with Chamberlain. This is the guy that people say did kind of inspire Chamberlain to do this. So it is definitely connecting directly with what our topic is. It's, let me see, I had it up here. Tozer, Sergeant Tozer. He was born February 11th, 1838 in Purgatory, Maine. Quite the name there, Purgatory.
Quite the name.
Yeah. He was the fifth of 7 children, or 10 children. Fifth of 7 children. Let's see. Actually, I think he was part of the 2nd Maine. Yeah, he was part of the 2nd Maine that he was convinced by Chamberlain to join the 20th Maine. Wow. Him and his unit were considered mutineers. They refused to take up arms and continue their service. And yeah, and he ends up joining Chamberlain in the 20th Maine, and this is what he did. He was in it. He was part of the color guard, which is holding for the company, like the colors, the flag, which is very important in that kind of warfare, because you want to be able to see the flags through the smoke, right? If you lose sight of the flag, your morale goes down. That is a very common thing with this kind of fighting. Okay, so I'm going to read this, and it's going to be a little long, but it's worth it. So it says, at the center of the main line, the situation for the color company became dire. The companies on either side were being cut to pieces. The color company was down to just 3 men, Elisha Crone, William Livermore, and Tozer. Corporal Charles Reed took a bullet to the wrist and was unable to use his weapon, so Tozer traded the flag for Reed's rifle. Tozer loaded and fired until Reed was no longer able to continue, and then he retrieved the flag. At one point, Chamberlain peered through the smoke and saw Tozer standing alone where he had planted the colors. He had them resting inside the curve of his left arm as he rammed a cartridge into his musket with his right hand and discharged the weapon. Chamberlain recalled, I first thought some optical illusion imposed upon me, but as forms emerged through the drifting smoke, there stood Color Sergeant Tozer, his color staff planted in his elbow, so holding the flag upright, with musket and cartridges seized from the fallen comrade at his side, he was defending his sacred trust in the manner of the songs of chivalry. That right there is from a professor of rhetoric.
And you can tell.
Yes. Major Ellis Spear recalled how Tozer coolly chewed a piece of cartridge paper as he fired. He did not budge despite the storm around him. Before long, with the 20th's ammunition nearly exhausted, Chamberlain ordered the now famous bayonet charge that drove the Alabamians from the hillside and secured Little Round Top. So yeah, that right there, that dude was doing his job. That dude is a hero. Absolutely. So that is, I just, again, and I absolutely think Chamberlain had to have been inspired by him. I think when you see that and you're like, holy moly, that dude, that act of bravery inspires people.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
So I actually had one too.
Okay.
I'll go run through this one quickly. His name was William Colville from Minnesota, actually. Born in New York, lawyer, moved to the Minnesota Territory at that time to continue practicing law. When the war broke out, it actually said that he lined up and was in a race with the other men of the town to be the first Minnesotan to sign up for the war.
Wow.
He's described as being a husky 6'5", which is gigantic.
Yeah, for
that
then.
time. Could you imagine? Oh, and he was promoted to colonel right away too. But yeah, whatever, dude. A 6'5" giant redhead Scottish guy as your commander.
Yeah, talk about imposing.
completely imposing. Um, but the Minnesota First was actually part of Antietam, Fredericksburg, Glendale,
Oh,
some
wow.
fairly major battles.
Yeah,
Um,
seriously.
and Coville himself was shot 6 times throughout his service and kept coming back to lead his men. Um,
Jeez.
I actually read just before Gettysburg, it said 3 days before, he was actually arrested by the Army of the Potomac because he allowed some of his men to cross a different part of the river so they didn't have to take off part of their uniform. And
Oh,
because of that,
wow.
he was arrested and threatened with court-martial.
Jeez.
But as luck would have it, I guess, Gettysburg happened. And he was stationed in the dead center of the Union line. And immediately to his right, they had to leave because they needed to plug a different hole. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the general to his left just disobeyed orders and left. And so
Wow.
he was by himself with his men. That meant only was about 260 people at that time. And so General Lee saw this and he saw it as a way to punch through the direct center of the Union
Mm.
line. And so he ordered, um, I think it was Alabama as well, uh, to advance. And it was 1,600 Confederate soldiers that he ordered an
Okay.
all-out advance. And so the General Hancock, seeing this and knowing what happened, immediately flagged down reinforcements that were in reserve to come plug this hole, but he needed time. And there was no time because the Confederates were gonna make that hole. And so he rushes in to the front line to see who's there, and it's only William Coville and the Minnesota First. And
Wow.
he tells Coville, who's already injured, just taken out of his handcuffs earlier that morning, and tells him, points at the Alabama flag and says, "Colonel, I need you to take those colors." And it said, without hesitation, Coville draws his saber, stands up, points down the hill, and yells, "Charge." And his men follow him with zero hesitation.
Wow.
There's a couple things that were in their favor. It was just about to be nighttime, so the sun was setting. So the dark blue of the Union uniforms actually was a form of
Mm.
camouflage. And at the bottom of their hill, there was a creek bed that the Confederates couldn't see since it was going to be night. So that slowed them down considerably. And so the men from the Minnesota came down the hill, fired a volley into the Confederates. It surprised them, and they were able to load and shoot again. But then the Confederate line opened fire, and the Minnesota First lost 215 men in 10
Oh my
minutes.
gosh.
And at the end of this, they were only left with about 45 men still living.
Wow.
Coville himself was shot twice. Um, once through the ankle, which actually took him out of the war effort. But I want to read you two quotes. One was
Okay.
by General Hancock himself. Said, "I had no alternative but to order the regiment in. We had no force on hand to meet the sudden emergency. I saw that 5 minutes must be gained or we were all lost. It was
Man.
fortunate I found there so grand a body of men as the Minnesota First. I knew they must lose heavily, and it caused me great pain to give the order. But I would have done it if I had known every man would be killed."
Wow. What a
And
quote,
so
dude.
they, because, and the Confederates didn't retreat necessarily, they fell back a little bit, but that gave the reserves just enough time to plug that hole. Um, and then afterwards, while he was in the hospital, a nurse by the name of Tilly Pierce was looking after Colville, and she wrote, "He was highly esteemed by all his men, many of whom visited him at the house, and even wept over him suffering.
Wow.
His men absolutely loved him."
Wow. That excuse me, that honestly speaks for itself, how much his men loved him.
Truly a remarkable man.
Yeah, that is, yeah, dude. I mean, these are heroes. I don't know what else to say. And the Civil War is just littered with them. So for our listeners, if you want to hear us talk more about specifically Civil War heroes, absolutely. But we want to continue this kind of unsung heroes of history series and really look at these men and women that changed history. And again, not these just gigantic, grand things, but by doing their job and making sacrifices within the fog of war or the fog of life that changed history. So, Carl, do you have anything else you would like to add before we get off here?
I think the biggest thing that came to my mind while researching this, and the grandeur and the wonder and the respect that I gained for these people, it's something that I heard a while ago, and it's God doesn't call the equipped, he equips the called.
Yep. I think that is a great quote to end with. So with that, we can't wait for you guys next time. And I'm Gabriel.
I'm Carl.
And this is History Unscripted. Thank you for listening.